Good evening. How are you? I thought I'd talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. But first, the weather. The weather is chillier, I don't know, 60-ish something. It's overcast. It's probably going to rain, hopefully, after I stop walking. And otherwise, it's pleasant. The reason I mentioned Scorsese's film is because I saw it this afternoon. It's a short 3-hour film, but it flies by. And it's about a subject that we just can't figure out how to handle. To put it in the most general terms, white people on this earth have trouble with differences in color, especially language, and other things. Now, some of you may remember, I think it was 20 years ago, a movie about the rabbit fence and how in Australia they were trying to blend the Aboriginal tribes by bringing them into families so that they would become whiter over time. And then there was also outright discrimination. So the Scorsese film is about the Osage tribes and how the land that they were given turned out, surprise, surprise, to be oil rich. And so it was kind of a Texas story in Arkansas in which the land is oil rich and good for cattle, which is kind of a Texan model as well. But the thing that's interesting about this is how the rights to the minerals were parsed in such a fashion that those who own the land had to have guardians appointed to regulate the land, and that there were marriages schemed and contrived with white men, basically, so that the value of these lands in terms of money would go to the men upon the death of the women. And there were quite a number of deaths. Now the movie, and I mention this because sometimes it's good to see how these things play out. The corrupt appetite for money, however unjust, unethical, is pushed aside so that one can get it, have that fortune in hand. Now, the cast is amazing. We have Robert De Niro, and he plays the head of a family in this area, in this time, in the 1920s. But again, this is an examination of a timeless kind of discrimination in which mammon, fortune, power is more important than love, loyalty, good behavior, right behavior. And if you watch this movie, you may see in another way a truth you know, how the De Niro character is like a Trump character. And better than Trump, however, is De Niro is a luxurious, persistent con man, which is not immediately obvious from the beginning of the movie. But I don't want to go too deep because it is a movie that has surprises. And it is a movie in which they can't get, that is, the tribes can't get fair investigations. And ultimately, people are prosecuted. And I won't tell you what happens to Hale, who is the leader, who is played by De Niro. And in the first scenes, when you see him, you may, like myself have trouble identifying him as De Niro. So there is, of course, a couple in this, and the couple, this woman Molly, is in a critical point in the family chain to control a lot of oil as it belongs to her, and so she's a prime target. Now, what can we say about this once we've started this conversation? What we can say about it is it's an old story, but told in a different way. And it's not this time in the Middle East. It's not about Jews. It's not about Palestinians. It's not about Ukrainians. It's not about Russia. It's not about the Aboriginals. It's not about blacks in America. It's about all of those. And that's the reason to see this movie. Also, the movie, as dramatic as it is true. The details of this horrendous scourge against Native Americans who suffered in so many ways in this nation as the true original inhabitants of America are besieged, compromised, threatened, and the land they were given, they then tried to compromise the rights to that land. Now, ultimately, these laws were changed, but not before, in some estimates, there were 100 or more deaths, and there was some self-help involved. Now, in terms of the music of the people, there are powerful scenes with this music. And like many societies, and I think of the Irish, but also if you listen to the Far Eastern drums, there's a drum beat that's really important in the movie. And at the end of the movie, and I'm going to try not to be precise because I think it's fun to be surprised by it, you should know there are meditations that are done in sand paintings and also in various other media that are considered mandalas, M-A-N-D-A-L-A. And those are believed, once completed, to have spiritual and magical significance. And Scorsese has found a way to create the most astonishing mandala, and I won't say anything more than that. Also, the movie recommends itself because, as in real life, there are several twists and turns in the movie that make it that way. Now, why lift a movie out of probably our usual topics when there's so much else going on? Because the movie, in a way, even though the 3 hours does not go slowly, is a meditation out of time, in a way, of something long ago, proven true, that persists in various ways today, and we don't act upon it. The passivity, the failure of people to have courage, to have heart, is amazing. And we see it at every time. And this failure leads to suffering and heartache, discrimination. One of the things that is interesting about this movie is how the Osage Indians / Native Americans convey so much in few words, as is their way, as is described by Hale. Another aspect of it, which we know from our modern politics, is the great distance between what is said and what someone is doing. The disingenuity of the events are striking. And we live on a day-to-day basis with these things, but to the extent that they're distant in time or place, we can sort of say to ourselves, oh, that was entertaining. But it's more than that. So I suppose one of the things I'm saying is this is worth your time to see. Now, the theater we were in, and I don't know if this says something about the fact that it's too real or too long or whatever. Very few people were there. Holly and I wore masks. This was kind of a reward to both of us that I wouldn't be writing today or yesterday, but we decided we would break out and get some food somewhere and then go to this flick. And I've sworn off Coca-Cola, but I got a Coca-Cola in case the movie was too long. And I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And I think most people would be. Now, it's not just a contemplative movie. It's full of action and so forth, as is true in life. But the banality of those who only care about dirty, sloppy oil as it's converted into hard cash and power is captivating. And so the fossil fools of that day continue to want to seize for power, and the added layer, as in our present time, is we know the danger of fossil fuels to our environment, to our water systems, to our air, to our food, in every way, and how it is compromising the entire Earth's atmosphere. It's almost like there's a price to pay for the shortcuts people take in evil schemes that profit them individually at the risk and expense of many others. Now, does this mean we cast aspersions on capitalism? Sure, because the hybrid that America can try to justify is that we recognize a profit motive, but we're supposed to do it honestly. We're not supposed to scheme. We're not supposed to exercise cons. And the ones that get away are the biggest ones. This was a big one in a public space for years in the 1920s, and there was enormous suffering, and nobody did anything about it. So, I know this is not the usual thing I do, but the talking heads didn't seem to be saying anything new. And I'm not faulting the detail. It's good to know that things are happening and what minor advances there were. But I think that this movie is on a level with how many black persons were compromised and killed with charges pending of minor offenses by police who didn't give a damn if they killed them. Is that better or worse than what happened with the Osage, or what happened with the Aboriginals, or is going on in the Middle East? We have all these good books that tell us how to act, and people give them lip service but don't act upon them. Forgive me for repeating the obvious, but I've said it before, so I try not to do that. The course ahead is clear, and there are more voices speaking now about our current disasters. What I found upsetting of the talking heads that I heard was the statement by one commentator about the Speaker Johnson and how the Democrats were going to color him in a certain way, meaning paint him and who he was. I think that was terribly misleading, because the way it was said suggested, in the pattern of Republican rhetoric in which they make up things, that the Democrats were going to make up things about Johnson. But Johnson tried to overthrow the government. That's not made up. He filed a brief with the Supreme Court with 100 signatories from the Congress. He has no sympathy or support for a woman's individual's right of choice. And in fact, he thinks they're nothing more than baby machines. And we don't have to paint him. All of this material is public. It's known. And it's not known by a few people, it's known by a lot of people. And it's almost like the commentators, since they didn't know it, to them it's a big surprise. How is that possible? That a person that's third in line to be president, should the succession have to go forward, is this undeserving, right-wing, government and election denier. How could he be in that position? That's the failure of America. That's the failure of our leaders. And you can put most of it on the Republicans because they have the numbers, 20 to 75 Republicans who do not support these policies, who are so afraid of their phony baloney jobs, to borrow from Mel Brooks, that they would support this guy, hoping that by supporting him, they'll squeak through. Well, so that's the dilemma of America. How does it find its place? I mentioned Joseph Campbell the other day, and he had a slogan, "Follow your bliss." And he meant it as an individual selection, that if you do what you're meant to do, if you do what you want to do, if you're pure and clear in your own mind as to what matters, things will come and help you. But America's not following its bliss, applying this notion to the nation. Its bliss would be following the coda that we set when we drafted the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Those are the rules for this nation. And if we followed that, and if people told the truth, and if people showed courage and acted upon it, we wouldn't have the stress that the papers are reporting in our daily life for fear of what next terrible thing the Republicans will do, and the Democrats will passively observe and make some chortling remarks, but not save us from the possibilities of losing our democracy and our republic. So, that's my take today. I know I don't normally give movie reviews, but this movie by Scorsese with DiCaprio playing the husband of an Osage woman, it is sensational in the sense of it is a serious movie. It is supported by documentation. It's presented powerfully in a period of time that's less than it would take to read all the books about it. And I think it's honest in its artistic statement to the facts of the matter. So, tomorrow I see my doctor to find out if I can walk 40 minutes or lift or swim or do those kinds of things. But I'm glad that, by the way, they instructed me to walk, and they didn't mean longer periods of walk, but to walk because that would be helpful to recovery. So I've done that at least this walk, which I share with you on the Walk and Talk, and I try to do short walks because I don't want to convert the license to do little to do what I want, which is much more. So I spin in the non-temple of trees where I am, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.